Hello everyone, I'm back for round 2 of Lolli's Mate. Hopefully you watched the previous video in the Attacking the King series on Lolli's Mate. This one's often called Mayet's Mate, but I like to think of it as Lolli's Mate Part 2. In Lolli's Mate, we saw where this bishop here on f6 was actually a pawn. We referred to it as a nail in the coffin in the position covering this spot. But the beauty here is that with this bishop, the bishop controls more than just g7. It also attacks h8. And this is very, very important when combining the bishop with rooks. Let's get started. So what we're really looking for here is if we could get a rook to magically teleport to the h8 square, it would be defended by this bishop, and it would be causing a checkmate situation. Okay, well, this isn't Star Trek, so we're going to have to find a different way to get there than teleportation. Well, we simply sacrifice a rook because we've got another one, and it leads to the position that we're looking for. So hopefully you saw that rather quickly. I think the most important part of this position is to recognize this is a fianchetto'd pawn structure, and black is missing their all-important defensive dark squared bishop on g7, and what that causes is a dark square weak complex that we're taking advantage of by putting our dark squared bishop attacking the king's position through the hole that's been created by pushing the g-pawn forward. Okay, so here we have the black bishop, but he's not in position. We have a misplaced bishop, and we can take advantage of this situation with our two rooks. Keeping in mind, all we need is to get one rook here protected by the bishop to create this mating pattern. So we have the ability to sacrifice one, and this time, instead of capturing with the king, black moves his bishop into play, trying to protect this square, which would be fine except for the fact that we do have two rooks and the sacrifice still works. So what was important about this was that the bishop was misplaced. It needed to be defending here to start with. So if you're ever going to use a fianchetto'd position in front of your king, please be aware of where your dark squared bishop is because you need it to defend. Now, had we sacrificed this rook and the king wanted to take, well, I hope you noticed that he couldn't because rooks defend rooks. So our only hope here was to move the bishop. If the bishop had done some nonsense, silly move, I don't know why he would do that, but that, of course, is checkmate. All right, moving forward. You've heard me say it before, I'll say it again, pin to win. I hope you noticed the first thing you saw looking at this puzzle was that this pawn is pinned to the king. Always look for pins in your position because that means that this pawn cannot move, which means it's not actually defending the head of the pawn chain. This is useful to us. Again, we need to get this rook down to h8, which means we need to get rid of this pawn. Well, what if this pawn moved? Let's see what that looks like. In comes the queen with check. I hope you realize already that this does not work. Checkmate. So blocking is not going to work in this position. Okay, so then what can we do? Well, we can't capture here. Why? Because of the deadly pin. Okay, so that simply means that this pawn has to move. And now I hope you can see the move that wins, checkmate. So anytime that you happen to see a fianchetto'd pawn position, the first thing I want you thinking about is, you know, my dark squared bishop could control this diagonal. And if I can open up the H file and get a rook and a bishop to simultaneously attack the H8 square, then I can win the game using Lolli's Mate, or in this case, Mayet's Mate. And so you can get those pieces into position, and after several tactical maneuvers as pieces get exchanged off the board, hopefully you can get to this position. Now, Jean-Baptiste Lolli was the one who originally talked about putting a pawn here to be a nail in the position, landing a queen, and then Mayet's Mate changed this from a pawn to a bishop because it also attacked this square, which helps it with a rook coming down the H file. So it changed from pawn and queen to bishop and rook. Let's take a look at this position here. In comes the queen because why not use Lolli's famous mate? Whether it's a pawn or a bishop, we have the coverage we need for the checkmate. Okay, so what can black do here? Queen to f8, protecting this vital square and threatening our queen. Oftentimes, beginners and intermediate players get in a position like this. They don't know what to do. Queen trades will happen, or the queen will retreat, and the attack is lost. Well, when you find yourself in those positions, I want you to think of violent moves, really aggressive moves. One of the things you should look at every time it's your turn to move is every check option. Right now, we can see that if I captured this queen, that would be a check. And you could calculate, is that a good idea or a bad idea? You could see moving the queen here as a check. Calculate. Hopefully you see that this is also a check. And many of us are afraid to make it because we don't want to give up our queen for a pawn. However, by now, I hope you see the mating technique. Here comes our rook. Queen tries to block. Here comes the next rook, checkmate. Now this looks slightly different than what we were looking at before. But we were using the threat of that mating technique to draw him out into this corner. What if we back that up a couple of moves? What if the queen didn't block? What if the king simply retreated? I hope you can instantly see that we have our checkmate pattern. So that is why the queen had to block for her best effort. We get our queen back, so it's not really a sacrifice. And we did sacrifice a rook, but gaining the game. Is it really a sacrifice if you win? And there it is. All right, let's take a look at a game between Blackburn and Schwartz, played in Berlin in 1881. If you've been following along in the Attacking the King series, you've already seen the video on Blackburn's mate. But you know, the masters aren't against using another person's ideas. So we're going to see Blackburn using a different mating pattern here, using Lolli's and Mayet's mating pattern with the bishop and the rook. Let's take a look here. So we're not too concerned about the opening moves. This is the French defense. White here continues knight to c3. Today's, it's more popular to do the advance, closing off the position, taking this square away from the knight. But we're going for more of an open game. The French defense is a very attacking defense. With the exchange, we open up the center. You can already see that both the kings are in the center with a line open, and I hope you got better tactics than your opponent, let's put it that way. So always brush up on your tactics. Both sides developing, just trying to get castled. Okay, so they're both safe for now. Repositioning their pieces. Just trying to get developed, connecting their rooks, okay? Trying to lay claim to the open E file, very important. And nice central move by Black's knight. And now look at this. Oh, that trade is a beautiful trade. We've just doubled these pawns. That's a weakness in the end game. We've created a hole in front of White's king. However, I'd like to point out that that hole oftentimes can backfire, as it is creating an open lane of travel for these rooks and queen to attack your king, so you might want to think twice about that capture. And then Black does an odd thing. He gives White the opportunity to close up that hole, but he just creates another one. So there we go. Let's back that up for just a second. What if White had chosen to capture with this pawn? He wouldn't have doubled pawns anymore. He'd have a nice clean pawn structure, but White wants more than that. White wants an attacking lane. So he keeps that H file open. Well, Black is trying to rip open the position and gain an attacking advantage quickly, so he sacrifices his bishop. And what he was hoping for was that this bishop was going to capture, and that the queen would capture back, and we'd already have threats against the king's position, the wall in front completely decimated, and the other pieces would come in to bear. But Blackburn had other plans. Simply moved his king up, threatening the bishop. Well, now, by protecting this square with his king, this queen doesn't have access unless she's got extra protection. So he's declined the sacrifice and saved his king for now. But again, look at these amazing lines of opportunity. All we got to do is sweep these pieces across and then, bring the king down, and we've got an incredible open line of attack against Black's king. So Black's attacking ideas are kind of backfiring. Here comes that rook. A great position for the knight as opposed to f6. Over here, it can't be attacked and taken very easily, and it's still defending the key square. A nice rook lift, preparing to get something in behind it. Now, I want you to notice here that we've got a bishop, we've got a rook, we're about to bring another rook. So black has to do something to blunt this attack. Of course, it creates that fianchetto'd position, and notice the dark squared bishop is completely misplaced. So here we go, building the pressure. We don't know what black was thinking there. I mean, okay, developing a piece, but doing nothing for king safety. We'll attack that rook and again, make it move again. And what we're really trying to do is reposition to this key square. All right, attacking the center. Just so you know, this pawn really was trying to get here to displace and dislodge this bishop. Black wasn't having it. And now we've got this bishop in the attack, and notice the pin. So we've got all of our pieces coordinating as white, and even though it looks like our position is busted around our king, we're actually quite safe here. Now Blackburn, if you saw the video, loves this pawn structure. We referred to it as Blackburn's mate, but if you saw the video, you know that to do Blackburn's mate, what you really need is a knight on f3 hopping into g5. You really need this dark squared bishop over on this diagonal here. You need this bishop on this diagonal here. So none of the pieces are in the right place. We don't even have a knight for white to do Blackburn's mate. So Blackburn had to change his ideas and go with Lolli and Mayet's attacking pattern. We simply move the rook into place. We're trying to prevent some movement here. We're also protecting this square from this invasion with this bishop. Attacking the bishop, no big deal, maintain our pin. Moves the knight to threaten here, but that's kind of a silly move for black. Black needs to defend this square. Black needs to defend this pawn. Black needed to be aware that what white really wanted was the f6 square. So what is this knight doing attacking this bishop? Absolutely nothing, because we were going to move it anyway. Okay, a check. No big deal. We'll just take it with our queen. As we've learned in a lot of these tacking videos, sometimes sacrificing a queen is the right thing to do. And here it comes. You can see that the knights, or excuse me, the rooks are ready for attack. And what's black to do here? The threat is clear. And if you see what this bishop is doing, you can tell that everything is covered in front of this king. He could try to block, doesn't matter. He could try a senseless check, doesn't matter. Try to run away, still doesn't matter. The game is over. All right, so let's check out one last example. And in this one, black's going to try and give extra protection to the weak g7 square. Let's see how that happens. This game is only 21 moves, so we'll go through them rather quickly with a queen's pawn opening. Queen's gambit declined. Then finally decides to accept the gambit, giving white a big pawn center. This c-pawn is an excellent idea. Again, attacking that center will give you the big pawn center, but then we'll knock it down. So you can see the center is already opening up. More pressure on white. And so I love this move. What's black to do? Get rid of his castled position by taking back? Leaving his king in the center for attack? So in comes the attack, and white stuck in the center. Again, a big theme in attacking the king. If the king's in the center, attack, attack, attack. You can't castle out of check, so he's forced to just move. Now he loses his bishop. Forced to just move. This is not looking good for white. Black gets castled here, which is really weird. I suppose after all this attacking, he could have just taken this bishop, left his king in the center, maybe even considered castling queenside. But instead, he goes here, and surely he must have miscalculating this. In one move, white has a deadly threat. Look at that. Now this pawn is pinned. It's pinned by the queen. It no longer has the ability to take this bishop, and we're looking at checkmate. So he's forced to give us that fianchetto'd position, missing the important black bishop, already our bishop is in position, covering this square, as well as acting like a nail in the coffin from Lolli's mate. Okay, repositioning and getting ready to come while still providing protection to our center and key squares in our position. Okay, threatening our bishop. So now we give protection to the bishop. So look at this. Even if he takes the bishop, here comes the pawn to become a nail in the coffin in Lolli's mating pattern. There's the nail. So the king tries to give way, trying to give an opportunity for this rook to defend this square. Now, we need to bring our other pieces into the fight. We need to protect this knight because we're about to move our queen and we don't want to leave this knight hanging. We may need it. This queen move may seem strange to you, but you're about to see why it made that move in just a moment. In comes the queen, defends the rook, and now we move our knight. Why? Repositioning to attack the position. We need more pieces. And here's why black made their move. Over here earlier to b4, to bring it in and threaten this queen. So again, we don't necessarily want to do a queen trade here, so we just add more pressure. Wow, I don't think many of us would have the courage to just let our queen sit here undefended. Go ahead and pause the video here and see if you can figure out why Blackburn was the last example, why white allowed his queen to sit here undefended. Okay, you're back. Let's see what happens. If the queen takes, what would you do as white? Hopefully you found knight captures f7 checkmate. Look at how the nail covers the escape square. Okay, so black realizes this already. We can't do this. So the only other option is we're threatening checkmate protected by the knight. The only way to defend that is to put either this rook or that queen on this square to defend, which of course puts it under attack by this nail in the coffin. So, excuse me. So up comes the rook. All right, this is another great place to go ahead and pause the video and try to figure out what would you do as white here. It seems like black is doing everything they can to defend. If white were to take with the pawn, what would happen? Well, we have the king and the queen defending. So that's simple. If I take with the pawn, then you take with the queen. Now the queen is defending. Let's take a look at that. This checkmate is defended. This queen is in danger. A queen trade simply takes away the attack. We're in a lot of trouble here. Now, I suppose maybe this move. Okay. So what's black to do here now? Block with queen. Now it's pinned. Checkmate. Okay, so that is one option. So what else can we do? Well, we could capture with that pawn, but here's what was played in the game. Just immediately pinned the queen. Now the threat is captures this pawn. So again, if the queen takes this rook, luring her away, now we have checkmate. Or if the queen backs up to provide protection, now we can take. And if the rook takes, we have checkmate. If the king takes, we have checkmate. Wow. So backing this position up just a little bit here, when we moved this knight into position, seemingly carelessly leaving our queen in prise, we had a lot of different options. I would encourage you to watch this video multiple times, practice these positions over the board with a friend. Remember, repetition is the mother of learning. And like I always like to say, you are what you repeat. Until next time, Zach Wilson, Hood County Chess Club.